Hola clase, bienvenidos a la segunda parte del capítulo 14 y en esta parte vamos a hablar de dos puntos de gramática, dos puntos más de gramática. So, second part of chapter 14, we've got two pieces of grammar left in this chapter. And the first one, well, it says here, we're on page 496, it says talking about the past from a past perspective. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's called the past perfect is what this is called. El pasado perfecto, you could say in Spanish, or pluscuamperfecto, it's got a couple different names. And it is when you're referring to something in the past that happened before something else in the past. That's what it's used for. And it's really just like English. It works just like this tense in English. The only thing is that many people in English misuse this tense. So that if you are one of the people that misuse it in English, you also won't understand it in Spanish. But yeah, it's used to refer to an action that happened in the past before another past action. That's what it's used for. So they have some examples here for you. Ningún escritor latinoamericano había ganado el premio Nobel de Literatura antes de Mistral. And it's a literal translation here in English. No Latin American writer had won the Nobel Prize for Literature before Mistral. So Mistral won the Nobel Prize in the past. It was in the 40s when she won it. And before that, no one else had won it. So that is what that's used for. We're talking about something in the past before something else in the past. Right? Otros escritores habían sido nominados para el premio, pero ella lo recibió. Other writers had been nominated for the award, but she received it. So when she received it, which is in the past, before that, other people had been nominated. So the past perfect is what you had done. And that's contrasted with the present perfect, which is what you have done. For example, I have visited 10 countries. That's the present perfect, right? The past perfect is, before 2000, I had visited 5 countries. After 2000, I visited 5 countries more. Right? So in the year 2000 is in the past, and I'm saying before that, I had visited 5 countries. So it's really a simple concept, but a lot of people misuse it in both languages. But that's the concept. In the past action before another past action. And to form it is quite easy. It's just the imperfect of haber, which is here for us. Había, habías, había, habíamos, habíais, and habían. And all of those have accent marks, by the way, don't forget that. We know our accent marks are important. And the second part of this is the past participle, which is the form of the verb that ends in ADO for AR verbs, as you can see here, hablar, hablado, or IDO for ER and IR verbs. So comer would be comido, vivir would be vivido. So those are your two parts for this tense, the past perfect. Now the past participle is fairly easy to form, although there are some irregulars. Don't forget there are some irregular past participles. For example, hacer, the past participle is hecho. Decir, dicho. Abrir, abierto. And there are other irregular past participles. You may want to go back to page 360 in chapter 10. Chapter 10 is where the past participle is explained, how it's formed and what it's used for. So you may want to go back to chapter 10 and review the past participle if you've forgotten that, because that's a key part of this verb tense, the past perfect. Okay, so as we always have some practice exercises here, and there'll be one additional one in the Blackboard folder for you. And again, don't overthink it. The main thing is to know how it's formed, the había, correct form of haber, and the past participle. So in this case, había trabajado. Yo ya había trabajado y había ahorrado algún dinero cuando empecé la universidad. I had already worked and had saved some money when I began the university, right? So when you began the university, that's in the past. And before that, you had worked and you had saved money. That's the past action before the other past action. But anyway, keep in mind that you need the two parts, the haber and the past participle. and that it's a past action before another past action. If you got those two things down, you really won't have any problem. And we have some more additional practice activities there. Okay, and then the second piece of grammar for this chapter is, for this half of the chapter, is, okay, wait for this to come up here. Okay. So this is the infinitive as subject or object of all. So as you know, the infinitive is the verb before it's been conjugated when it ends in a, excuse me, AR, ER, or IR. That's the infinitive. And the infinitive is used a little bit differently in Spanish than it is in English. And they kind of explain it here for you. The infinitive is the only verb form that may be used as the subject of a sentence, as the subject corresponds to the English ing form. So in English we might say, talking is necessary for changes to occur. Talking may look like a verb, but it's actually a noun here, right? Talking is necessary for changes to occur. That's actually a noun. But in Spanish, you don't use the ing form. You would use the infinitive form. Dialogar es necesario para lograr cambios. So literally, to dialogue, to talk, is necessary in order to achieve changes. Hacer comentarios negativos no es bueno para nuestras negociaciones. So, hacer, right? And so, but in English we would say making, we would use the ing form. Making negative pronouncements is not good for our negotiations. In Spanish, they would use the infinitive form. Same thing after prepositions, as we see here. Llama antes de ir. Call before going. Ir means to go. It's what it means. It means to go. And in English, we might say going. We use the ing form. In Spanish, we use the infinitive form. The form ending in AR, ER, or IR. And there's a couple other uses here. Al plus the infinitive. Al recibir su carta de despedido, llamó al director. Upon receiving his pink slip, he called the director. Once again, recibir is the infinitive. In English, we would tend to use the ing form. In Spanish, they would use the infinitive form. Okay, and then also there's a couple more here which I won't read to you. But the overall theme of this is that oftentimes in English, when we use the ing form, in Spanish, instead of using that form in Spanish, they would use the infinitive form. And you get used to it, the more examples that you see. Okay, and that is the second piece of grammar. Of course, we have some additional culture, as always. Always read those. And then the last thing is our Cineastas en Acción, the video series that we see. I believe we've seen it every chapter. But anyway, you have that, which is a great use of the vocabulary from the chapter. It's a great way to hear it in context and just to hear the Spanish spoken in general for fluency. But it's also for vocabulary because, of course, it integrates the vocabulary into the action, into the video. So you've got your vocabulary and you've got your listening comprehension. Okay, so that is it for the chapter. There's a couple more things that I have assigned. Actually, there's another listening after the video, but that's essentially the rest of the chapter. Okay, and then this week, of course, as we're finishing chapter 14, you will also take your quiz over the whole chapter as well. Okay, hasta pronto.